Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Dustin Brown, and in this video we're going to talk about addiction and how I finally overcame it. Let's get it. So, before we get into, the topic of how I beat addiction and how I got past it, let's talk about why I chose substances, and why eventually it led to me getting, addicted to these substances I was using. So a little bit about me. I would say it pretty much started all the way back to when I was 16. Back then my parents, they had careers, and we moved around a lot. So, when you're that young and you move around a lot, and by no means do I fault my parents for it. Everyone has their careers and things they strive for. But, in the process of when you're young and when you're moving around a lot, each time we would, move to our specific places, I would build connections with people and get friends, and, and really have these deep connections with certain people. And then, we would move on from there and start a new place. So each time that happened, I would have to leave friends behind, and at a certain point, mentally and emotionally, I put up this wall. And, I'd always tell myself it really doesn't matter who I meet. I'm really not going to have connections with them in the process, and we're probably going to end up moving anyway. So I'm not going to, really build up these connections with people and friendships. So by building up this wall, it really shut me off emotionally. And, wouldn't really build up connections. And in the process, loneliness started really kicking in. And when you're that young, you don't really know how to deal with things. You go to school, you try to have fun while you're at school, you go home, eventually you go out with people, you go hang out at a friend's house, you go places, and you try to have fun. So I really put up this, thing inside where everyone really thought I was having fun. And, deep down inside, I really wasn't. I really had nobody to talk to. And, my parents were always busy with work. And, so it was really hard to communicate with somebody. So back in about 2002, I got into a band. And we practiced a lot, and, we played some shows, and, it was fun. Musically, it really helped me out, but still deep inside mentally, nothing was really changing. We went to parties, and, I started with a drinking problem, and, and then from there, it really led to other substances I was using. Whether it be opiates, and, to, uppers that led to me using. Now when I was really using it, it really let me forget about the things that, I was worried about deep inside, and it really shut me off emotionally. And, I liked that at the time. I didn't have to focus on the problems that were, I was feeling inside. So it was really easy to use substances and to help me out, day to day. Well, at first it really wasn't that bad. I use every once in a while. And, but then, as a lot of people have probably experienced, using substances ends up to using more substances, and then it gets even worse to the point to where you rely on it daily. And, that's where I got to that point, where I had to use, these things that I was using daily, to really get through my day. And it was all day, from the minute I woke up, when I did sleep, to, the minute, I eventually at some point would go to sleep. And at some point, I was up for 4 or 5 days at a time, and it really, affected me mentally, and as well as emotionally. So it kept going on, till about 2004. I moved out of my parents' house, and I moved back up to Northern California, to another family's house to really get myself clean and to try and better myself. Um, and about Christmas in 2004, I'll post a picture up, I met my wife. So yeah, that's me on the left hand side, and what is going to be my future wife on the right. So by no means this is a bad photo. It's, pretty much the day me and my wife got together. But when I look at this photo, I still sometimes I still see a sick person. This is right around when I had moved back up north, and I was pretty much 2 months sober at this point. So before this photo was taken, I had met someone at a job I was working at and would relapse for the first time. And for that one time, that one night, I got arrested. And, obviously I went to the drunk tank and I spent the night there. And when they released me in the morning, I had court, went through all that process, and was put into a drug program. So still, I really didn't realize I had a problem, and I just kept telling myself I didn't have a problem. I could, stop at any time, and there's nothing really anybody could do. So I still had this wall up at this time, and I was dating my, future wife at the time, and she was. I didn't realize that she was helping me out, little by little, and really bringing myself out. So, we continued dating, and about early 2005, I relapsed for the second time. Now, in the process of this, I'm still supposed to be going to my drug program, and I really wasn't going. I kept getting kicked out. I'd get re-entered in the program by the judge every time I went to the court. And let's say in about November 11th, 2005 would be the last time I touched a substance. Now, getting clean in the grand scheme of things wasn't really hard. Now, everybody goes through it differently, but for me, it wasn't really hard to get off the substances once I kind of realized I had a problem, but I didn't realize what was causing the root problem. So, November 11th, 2005 is my clean date. But I was still not going to the program. I still really wasn't talking to anybody, and I kept getting kicked out. So I went to court at one time, and the judge basically told me, hey, dude, if you get kicked out one more time, it's your last chance. You're going to go to prison. Well, I got kicked out. So what did I do? I ran for 2 years, and I had a warrant. And, I eventually, as everybody does, I finally got caught. And I thought, well, I these are the things that I built up, and the ramifications, and I'm gonna go, to prison at this time. So the cops showed up at my house, and fortunately they decided me, but I still had to go to court. So I went to court, and basically, long story short, I got lucky, and the judge was leaning on me, and he re-entered me in the program. So at this time, I was talking to somebody in the program. His name was Jimmy. I can't remember his last name, but he sat me down and had a heart to heart with me, and basically said, "Hey, dude, like, this is basically going to be your end goal. If you continue on your path, you're going to end up going to prison, and that's going to ruin your life at some point." So at this point, I kind of started to pay attention to the people around me, and I finally started sharing in the program, and talking about the issues that I had. And after sharing and finally listening to all these people, I realized I'm not the only one that's going through this. And really, I didn't have the problems that a lot of people really did. And I realized that and listened to the stories, I realized that, I really need to start taking care of myself. So I kept talking to Jimmy, and I started going to therapy, and I started getting a lot of the problems out. Well, at this point, I moved in with who would be who she is, my wife now, and I built a deep connection with her parents, and you know, they really helped me out a lot emotionally, and I started talking to you know a lot of my friends, and I started building connections again, and I started realizing that a lot of this isn't going to go away. So I continued on with the drug program, and I completed it, and my case got dismissed, and finally everything started going smoothly. So basically what I'm saying is no matter the struggles you're going through, and the path that you're leading, that it's as hard as it is to think that it won't get better, it does get better. And I know it's kind of cliche to talk about, and but I went through it, and if I can get through it, I'm pretty sure everybody can get through it. It's just realizing that you have a problem, admitting to yourself that you do have a problem, and really sticking to that, and you know, striving to be better at life. Now, is it gone completely? No, I struggle with it almost daily. It's never gonna go away. I'm an addict at root, and you just know that every day sometimes will be worse, but just know that if you strive down that path again, the consequences that are going to come, and that there's so much out there, and so much more life, and love, and better things out there than sticking to that path that you're used to. So at the end, if you get anything out of this, just know that there's other people out there, and there's people that are going through hard times too. And I hope if you're watching this and you're going through the problems that I had, or you're going through anything in life, talk to somebody. Don't hold it inside. It leads to worse causes. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.